just how the mighty fallen, how the mighty fallen inside war, how are they fallen, and we have apps that's not so bad, but in the middle of a battle, the general dies, what do you do then? There's something even worse than that. When the general dies in the middle of the battle and you have no idea now how to proceed, you don't know the next maneuver because it's all in his head and it's all gone. Said the Krinkorov, that's what happened when the Chofetz Chaim died. We have no way of carrying on, of what's our survival, because it was all in the Chofetz Chaim's head of what next to do. But the point I'd like to bring out is not so much the drush, but more the simple pshat. David described Yehonason as a gibor, a valiant warrior, and he was one of the most powerful, victorious, dynamic, charismatic leaders in Klal Yisrael. That's the way to look at him. Let me bring you another episode. In Shmuel Aleph in Perek Yud Daled, there was a battle at a place called Michmash, and the Pelishtim, the Philistines, were on top of the mountain, and the Klal Yisrael at the bottom, and they didn't know how the battle would proceed. And Yehonason took, I think, 20 or 30 Chayalim soldiers and ran up the mountain and called out to them, if the Pelishtim say, stay where you are, we'll come and get you, it's unlikely we'll succeed. But if they say, you should come and get us, it's a sign from Shamayim that we'll be successful and victorious. And they clambered up the mountain, and they opened battle, and they decimated the whole camp of the Philistine army, of the Pelishtim army. It was a gibor chayil. There was no weakness in Yehonason at all. So what does it mean? It's not a sign of weakness. It's a sign of strength. Giving up in friendship, it's like, why should I give up? Let the other person give up. It's not a weakness. It's a mistake. And that's a point which I think is very, very... It's the whole basis here of the greatness of who Yehonason was. The Gemara in Megillah explains actually this was a very fine family trait. If you remember his great-great-grandmother, if you remember, Yehonason came from Shaul, who came from the tribe of Binyamin, and the matriarch of Binyamin was Rachel Imenu. Rachel Imenu gave up everything for Leah, so that Leah would marry Yaakov, gave her the Simonim and helped her. And if you know a little bit in Yirmiyahu, the Navi brings out and explains that Rachel mevaker al baneha, Rachel specifically, Rachel Imenu, who gave up, she was the one who cries for Klal Yisrael, and that's where we go to her grave, because the greatness of Rachel Imenu, who gave up, the strength of Rachel Imenu. The Medrash brings out there in the beginning of Eicha that at the time of the destruction of the first Beis Hamikdash, of the first temple, in Shamayim there was an enormous commotion going on. The Avos came and complained, Moshe Rabbeinu came, and each one came and said, the Medrash says, that I have merit. Avraham Avinu said, I was prepared to sacrifice my son. It's in the Medrash, in the beginning of Eicha, and Hashem turned around and said to Avraham Avinu, it's not enough schus. Yitzchak said, I was prepared to become a korban. Wasn't enough schus. Yaakov Avinu, he was prepared, he worked for years for Lavan, and was twisted and swindled and deceived all the time. There's not enough schus to stop the churban. And then Rachel Imenu jumped up, says the Medrash, and cried in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, look what I did. I gave up my husband so that my sister would marry him, Leah to marry Yaakov. HaKadosh Baruch Hu said, for that, Klal Yisrael b'shavu banim likvuvan will come back. The schus of having given up was an enormous credit that there will be a geula shlema in the schus of Rachel Imenu. Esther came later generations also from Rachel Imenu, next in line, gave up. She gave up her whole life to live with Achashverosh, to save Klal Yisrael. Nafshi b'shelosi v'ami b'vakosh. The greatness of having given up, it's not a weakness. And that's the point which I like to bring out, the fourth point of the greatness in marriage, in friendship. What does it mean, the ability to give up? That's a very strong bond of friendship, a point in the formula. The next point which I'd like to bring out is this incident which we mentioned previously of the arrows. That he shot the arrows, and it was a sign that David should either come forward or run away from Yerushalayim. The Dubna Magid in the Sefer Kochav Miyakov asks, what on earth was there a need for shooting the arrows. 5 minutes later, David and Yehonason met, they said goodbye to each other, they embraced, and David ran away. So if they were going to meet, why shoot the arrows? And the Dubno Maggid explains from the Gemara in Eruchin the following idea behind Yehonason, why he insisted on using the arrows to inform David that he should run away and not come back. Says the Gemara that when a person speaks Lashon Hara, it injures 3 people: the one who says it, the one who hears it, and the one who is spoken about. Yehonason, despite being unbelievably close with David, an intimate friend, and even for pikuach nefesh, for saving the life of David, he didn't want to talk bad about his father. And therefore he used the ploy of shooting the arrows in order to avoid telling David and discussing what his father Shaul wanted to do, which would be a form of Lashon Hara, and he didn't want to say that. Even to save his life, he found a way out. It was Yehonason's idea. What rule of friendship do we learn here? Sometimes people become very close, but they bring down the barriers of halacha. Maybe because you're very close with somebody, you can gossip, you can slander, you can say what you want, but in reality that's not the case. And perhaps we learn this, I'd like to bring it out as a point of reference in a friendship, that however close you are with somebody, it doesn't mean that one relaxes the halachas of Shulchan Aruch. They stay. You can be close, but still guarded and careful and cautious of different aspects in halacha. The last point is the most beautiful point which I saw in the writings of Reb Chaim Zaychik in a sefer called Kol Tzarfiach. And he explains an interesting point, if you've ever learnt in Shmuel Aleph, that the name Yehonason changes at Perek Yud Ches, chapter 18. Yehonason is originally written Yud Vav Nun Tov Nun, but then it changes to be Yehonason. He gains a hey, becomes Yehonason in Perek 18, Yud Ches. Why is that? And the Alshich explains, the more time that Yehonason felt with David, he grew spiritually. Not like David said that I gave you a bag of worms. Well, that was from David's perspective. But Yehonason, no question, why on earth did he stay so close with David? What was there to gain by being together with him? He grew. He was a Talmid Chover. He listened to him. He learned from him. David was an outstanding Talmid Chacham, a tzaddik, a great chassid, and he learned from him. That's why Yehonason stayed with him. And he gained the hey. It doesn't say anywhere in the Navi, but you see it's written differently, and that's what the Alshich explains, what Zaychik brings down. And therefore, perhaps that's the last principle which can be suggested in friendship. What's the point of it all? One has to be careful when choosing a friend that it's not someone who'll bring you down, who'll make you talk Lashon Hara, or a friend who leads you in bad ways or bad company. It's not a friend. It's not a good friend. A good friend is somebody who will keep your standards, or halavai bring you even higher than that. And that's why Yehonason stayed with David. That's why he gained the hay. These are the 6 points which I'd like to suggest is something of a code of practice of a friendship. When Koheles says, Toivim hashnayim min ha'echad, 2 are better than 1. Yes, but how do you formulate it from the abstract into the practice? I'd like to suggest these are the 6 points. But perhaps there's a twist at the end of this shir. And maybe we should really be more focused. Who is in reality supposed to be a person's best friend? A spouse. It's supposed to be that way. And maybe all these points which we brought out are really only a directory of how to relate in marriage with a spouse. You can't marry somebody for money, just for looks, just for a good time. It has to be Eina Tulia B'Dover, not Tulia B'Dover. I'd like to mention here what the Rambam mentions. What does it mean, Eina Tulia B'Dover, not dependent on something? Says the Rambam, ומפני זה כשתהיה סיבס האהבה, when the cause of the love is inyan eloki, it's something spiritual, something with kedusha in it. V'hu hamada ha'amiti, it's the true, real knowledge between two people. You share, you grow together in spiritual growth. Ha'ava hahi, that love, will never ever will never be dispelled. It will always stay. Why? The reason for the love, these are beautiful words of the Rambam. Masmedes hametzius. It's like in English we would call it, it has perpetual motion. It always has momentum. It's always moving. It's always growing. It promotes itself. It continually, it's like it has its own generator inside it. When you have between the two people, of course, and that's what marriage is. If marriage is based on something which they just enjoy together, it's not going to last, because the object of affection and interest will just disappear and the love will disappear. It has to be something, and that's what we mean, and ish ve'isha, shchina shuya v'neihem. If you have a connection of Torah and mitzvahs and growing in spiritual acquisition, then it has something to perpetuate it. It keeps on moving, keeps on growing. That's the point behind it. Secondly, of course, or rather, that's the first point, the second point is that there should be no guessing game between a husband and wife. Clear. Of course you have disagreements. You speak it out, you open up the discussion, and you clear the air and carry on. But it has to be with no guessing game. It has to be clear. It has to be spoken out. The third is Noiseh ba'oil. That's what I suppose what the non-Jews say when they get to the altar, no? In sickness and in health. Rich or poor, but it's right, it's correct in that respect. It's Noiseh ba'oil. Different people have different periods in their life, and each spouse supports the other, whether they're up or they're down. That's the basis of marriage. I'd like to share with you an incident which I myself witnessed, which I'll never forget. What does it mean being Noiseh ba'oil with a wife? My son, 26 years ago, I think it was, went to a cheder in Yerushalayim. It was called Chavos Das. And the cheder had a very generous benefactor in Los Angeles. His name was Seymour Rosenberg, Shimon Meir Rosenberg, who had given a fabulous amount of money. He's no longer alive, but he gave to the cheder, and they built a new wing, and they were making a dedication, and they asked that all the parents should come along and attend this banquet to show honor to this benefactor, to this Mr. Rosenberg, Oliver Shalom. Well, I tell you, we all went there to the banquet, and every person, every father who was sitting there, the women as well came along, I think, we all left crying. This is what he had said, this man. He gave a little bit of his life history. As a young man, he'd done a degree in engineering at City University in New York, and then he'd gone off to the US Navy, and he came back and he became a patent lawyer. He then went to work to the United States government in Washington as a patent lawyer, and he became extremely successful. He worked for Hughes Aircraft in California. He then went to the Mattel company. He had devised a scheme in mergers where companies can be taken over through stock options. It was a very complicated, but he became fabulously wealthy. And he described a little bit of what happened to him in his personal life. He said, when I was a young man, in my early 20s, I got married, and within a year, my wife became a vegetable. She was struck with polio, and she was completely incapable of moving or do anything from the neck down. She couldn't do anything. And I looked after her, he said, for 39 years. I had 2 nurses, one for 8 hours in the day, another for another 8 hours, and I looked after the night watch. Every night for 8 hours, including diapers. I looked after my wife for all her needs. I didn't need to work because I had made enough money. I could retire. I retired very early, in my early 40s. I had enough money. And it was as if my life was now going to be dedicated to my wife. He had one of the biggest Rolls Royces, I think, in Los Angeles, and he had it specially converted over that he could take his wife around and go to restaurants, and special restaurants where the table was high. Quite a remarkable man. He dedicated his life to looking after her. She was never functioned as a wife. She couldn't, she was incapable. And he said, as all this was going on, I looked into something maybe of value. He was an irreligious Jew. And he said, I actually went and joined the Zen Buddhists, and I was there for quite some time, and believe it or not, the priest set me up into Judaism. Because in one of his lectures, he mentioned about the Bible. And I said to the priest, what are you mentioning the Bible for? What's that book for? So the priest turned around, don't make fun of the Bible. The Bible's a very special book. So I turned around and said to the priest, but the Bible, what's in the Bible? And he made me think, this priest, if the Bible is important, I'll go and have a look. And he went to the conservative Judaism, and then eventually he found his way, believe it or not. He became a founding member of the community in Venice, California, Talmud of Simcha Wasserman. He learned with Rabbi Gershon Bess, Shlita. Every month he used to travel every month to Flatbush to learn with the Posek Reb David Cohen, a remarkable man who found his way into Musa. And he told his whole life story. Eventually he met Rav Wolber, and he helped publish many works of Musa. He found Jewish ethics fascinating, and he supported them. He supported yeshivas, but that's not the point which was so moving. What was so special was when he told his history, a little bit of history, it was much longer than I just told you just now, but he then said the following point. When she died, I'd been married to her, I think he said, for over just 40 years, because he looked after her 39 years, and she was married. About 40, 41 years, I think he was married to her. He said, I was absolutely broken. I was finished. And I couldn't understand why. Because she wasn't a wife. She never functioned as a wife. She couldn't do anything. She couldn't cook, didn't do anything at all. So why was I broken? And he said, I came to the conclusion, and this is what he said he learned from Rav Wolber. He also met a very close friend of mine, Rav Moshe Samsonovich, who brought him into Rav Wolber and the Musa, that I learned that the whole concept of love is based on have, to give. And in the giving, I loved her. Now that's an extreme case. It was very moving how he explained how he had, what his process of thought was. He made a beautiful comment and said that the word choiva, ches vav hey, ches vav beis hey, is connected to the word chiba, connection, favor, a delight. When you have a choiva, you can develop a chiba. It was all the chidushim which he said, but the point was quite clear, that he cared for her. And through his caring, he became so close. That's an extreme case. None of us should be tested in such a way. He died several years ago. Gave a tremendous amount of money to tzedakah. But that's a rule of marriage, like a rule of friendship. Clearly, when you give up in marriage, the fourth rule, you're not weak in marriage. Of course, it has to be al pi halacha. And of course, I suppose the golden rule of marriage is, what did you get married for in the first place? What's the tachlis? What's the point? By Yehonason and David, he saw he could grow from David, and that's why he stayed with him. And that's why he gained a hay. In marriage, it has to be the main feature. Ish ve'isha shchina shuvuya b'neihem, is the kedusha, is the spiritual value between the couple. And that's the real form of growth. These are the 6 points which are rules I'm suggesting of a code of conduct, a formula for friendship, which are valid and valuable in marriage. And these are the points which I think we can extrapolate on, perhaps, from what Shlomo HaMelech says, Tovim hashnayim min ha'echad, v'achut ha'meshulish, lo b'meher yinotek. The qualities of friendship, the gift of friendship. Maybe we can finish. It's almost as if it's a gift which we love to own, but we also hope to be. Everyone likes to have a good friend, but also to be a good friend as well. And these are perhaps the points which I hope will help to understand what's behind these points of friendship and Enod Nachaderu. Thank you.